Hi everyone, my name is Cam Ali. I'm a final year medical student at the George Washington University, also my undergraduate alma mater. And I just recently graduated from the University of Cambridge where I received my MBA in Healthcare Strategy and Innovation. I'm here to present AbdiCare, where we have a novel approach to cigarette smoking cessation. A doctor and a lawyer walk into a bar. No, that's not to start some funny joke, because one, I'm not very funny, and two, it's kind of true. Well, the doctor was actually a medical student, me, and the lawyer was Dave Holden White, who you see up here on the slide, who was an ex-Bioscience Enterprise lawyer. And the bar was actually a pub because it's England and they call them pubs. Anyway, Dave posed an idea to me. He said, how can we stop people from smoking cigarettes? And I said, interesting. There's ways that we replace nicotine. There's ways that we reduce dependency on nicotine, but not actually any way we can physically stop anyone from smoking. I was immediately hooked. We spent the next 3 or 4 days looking at different compounds and scouring the research and drawing up possible target reactions that we could use. We then brought in Graham Mills, who was a PhD candidate at the time at the University of Cambridge and also had some experience in pharmaceutical R&D. He looked over our schematics and our compound and said, hey guys, this might actually work. AbdiCare was born. Now we all know how bad smoking is for us, but let me throw some numbers at you that you may not know. Over 5 million people a year die from smoking-related causes. And over half of the 1 billion smokers in the world will die from similar causes. Smokers on average live 10 years less than non-smokers. What's worse is that the societal cost of smoking is over $19 billion in the UK and over $300 billion in the US. And the worst statistic to me personally, as a training physician, is that 68% of these people want to quit, but they can't. Smoking is just too addictive. In fact, only 6% can achieve cessation without any medication, and only 20% with the best medications. So clearly the market needs something better. That's where we come in. AbdiCare. AbdiCare has a patent-pending compound, ABX, which is a modified form of the chili pepper molecule capsaicin, which once it comes in contact with cigarette smoke actually releases that chili pepper molecule. Here's a basic schematic that I'm going to break down for you. Here's a basic schematic that I'm going to break down for you here using these 3 images. Now the final product concept is a nicotine inhaler along with our compound ABX. Now the patient will typically take it once daily in the morning when they're fully committed. Now after that, it will sit innocuously in the lung lining and nothing will happen throughout the day. However, if they decide to actually smoke, you can see at the bottom of the second image that specific chemicals in smoke will actually come into contact with the compound and release capsaicin. Free capsaicin in the lung, as you can see in the final image, will create a cough response and a mild discomfort, which will prevent the individual from smoking further. This is called aversion therapy. We're now taking something that was previously seen as positive, cigarette smoking, and creating a negative effect, retraining the brain of the cigarette smoker themselves. Now, aversion therapy isn't novel. It's been used in other cessation therapies, such as alcohol cessation, with a product called disulfiram, where nausea and vomiting is induced when the individual takes the medication along with drinking alcohol. And the reason we chose capsaicin is because there's actually robust clinical data behind capsaicin inside the lung itself. They've actually tested it even in cough challenge responses with COPD and asthmatics. It's been proven safe inside the lung. We're essentially hijacking that reaction and using it for cigarette smoking cessation. And again, it will not create a burning response in the lung. It's simply a mild cough response and a moderate discomfort. That prevents further smoking or inhalation of cigarette smoke in our case. So the market. Well, it's enjoyed a 3.8% compound adjusted growth rate over the last few years. And by the end of 2016 alone, will be $2.25 billion. By the end of 2023, it'll be $4.4 billion. This growth is primarily attributed to the maturation of the BRICS nations. For example, in Russia, where over 70% of the smokers are male, and that's 44% of the 44 million people in the population. And now they've started to ban smoking in public areas and start to funnel money into cigarette smoking cessation products. We've actually launched a survey, and one of the main questions in that survey was comparing our product to something like Chantix. We asked, would you want to take product A, which reduces dependence on nicotine, or would you want to take product B, our product, which actually prevents you from smoking via a cough response? Over 75% of individuals actually chose product B. We've also spoken with clinical industry experts, such as Dr. Daniel Lieberman, who's the head of clinical psychiatry here at George Washington. He really much loved our idea. He said that if we're able to deliver as we intend, that the market will be ripe for this type of opportunity. Physicians would love to prescribe it, and patients would love to use it. So what's on the market now? Why are we entering this market? Well, it's not very good. We have nicotine replacements, which aren't very efficacious. We have Zyban, which also isn't very efficacious and has some harsh side effects. And we have Chantix, which is the champion of this market. And by champion, it's only 20% effective 1 year out. And did I mention it has severe psychiatric side effects as a black box warning, which includes suicidal ideation. And we have nicotine vaccines, which actually have failed late-stage clinical trials, so they were canned. So how would a patient actually use our product? Well, since it is a pharmaceutical product, they'd have to get it prescribed by their physician. They go to their physician, and they'd enter a commitment contract, as typical with any other cessation therapy initiation. And they'd talk about their reasons for their commitment to smoking, and they'd undergo some positive lifestyle adjustments. They begin to retrain themselves, because smoking is an addiction that is multifaceted and requires a multifaceted approach. It's a complex psychiatry. So they'd have to begin to retrain themselves in that regard. In addition, they'd have to engage in some support systems, whether it be loved ones, family members, or significant others, to remind them to use the medication if they begin to relapse on their commitment itself. There also exists a possibility that we could create an electronic support system around our product specifically, whether it be mobile app or online community. We can essentially gamify cigarette smoking cessation by tracking smoke-free days and users sharing their experience with smoking cessation through the app. The final regimen will be similar to Chantix, which will be a 3-month regimen, which again involves our product, compound ABX, as well as nicotine, which will be tapered throughout that 3-month cycle to eventually 0. At the end of that 3 months, we'll engage in a maintenance therapy regimen, which will basically be as needed. So we'll have our compound, just an inhaler, and no nicotine. And our patients will use that if they feel like they're going to come across a situation later in the day that could compromise their commitment. So where are we now? Well, we have a provisional patent refiled in the UK. This allows us to file an international patent in the near future. We have verified a reaction, actually, with multiple PhD chemists and postdocs. We are now trying to synthesize the actual molecule, which is the biggest step in my opinion, and I'll get into that in the next slide. The team itself. I'm the sole member of the team currently. The other 2 members have a stake in the actual IP, and they are currently in England at a more gainful employment at the moment. But they'd be willing to join back onto the team if we picked up steam and some funding. Regardless of their commitment, I am fully committed to this proposition. I've actually already set aside time next year during my first year of residency at the University of Maryland to work on this proposition. My primary goals would be attain funding, distribute that funding appropriately, and give milestone feedback to investors. So again, the short-term business model is primarily our goals short-term are to synthesize a compound and to test it in lung proxy. The problem is that, well, the good thing for us is that capsaicin is safe in the lungs. We've seen that in previous clinical trials. Capsaicin does cause a cough response. And capsaicin is safe in even high-risk populations, such as asthmatics and patients with COPD. So those are some of the things that will kill a drug in late-stage clinical trials. For us, that's not an issue. So our major barrier to clinical trial effectiveness is the actual compound synthesis and to see if we can release capsaicin in a lung-type sample. After that, we'll most likely partner with a pharmaceutical company or gain additional venture capital dollars and go through animal trials. At the end of the animal trials, we'll file IND to go into clinical trials. You can see here how we'd use $35K in funding. Yes, it's a pharmaceutical venture. Yes, that's hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. But again, these first 2 steps are the most important in my opinion. And we can do that for around $28,000. We can actually synthesize the compound. We've talked to different synthesis companies. We can actually look at the preliminary data in lung sputum and see if we can actually create capsaicin in lung using smoke. The rest of the money we're just going to use to secure the IP. So a long-term business model looks like any other FDA product. We're going to need funding to get through the clinical trials. Yes, that may cost us in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But at that point, we would have hopefully partnered with a pharmaceutical company or gained additional VC dollars. At that point, we also have to look at device manufacturers to create the inhaler/e-cigarette device that we intend to use. We've already talked to different device manufacturers, and we're not actually reinventing the wheel with that. It's going to be a typical inhaler as used with many other products. Regardless of our final exit strategy, it could be possibly that we exit after stage 1 clinical trials or the beginning of stage 2 clinical trials, and we could gain a great financial amount at that point for us and our investors. That's a typical exit strategy. or we could gain additional dollars and go throughout the entire FDA approval process. Our goal value proposition in the end is target efficacy of 40% with 6 months abstinence and minimal side effects. We believe that if we could achieve somewhere near that, we could get a conservative estimate of $600 million per year. This is based off the assumption that we achieve similar results as Chantix in the market, which we could if our efficacy is better with less side effects. This is also based on the fact that our drug composition actually would cost 1/10 the price of Chantix. And we haven't even accounted for the fact that the market will grow by the release of our drug in about 8 to 10 years. So, I ask you to please help us, AbdiCare, help break the shackles of cigarette smoking addiction for over 1 billion people. I'd like to say a special thank you to Lex McCluster and the entrepreneurship staff of the GW Office of Entrepreneurship. Thank you. Yep.
Why aren't the makers of Chantix and Big Pharma on this already?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm assuming it's just because they don't have the actual technology itself. The technology is unique. Aversion therapy hasn't even been attempted in smoking cessation.
It's hardly believable. It seems to me like they would have launched some trials on this?
Yeah, I would have. Again, I think it's based on this being new technology.
And what is the source of the new technology?
Again, it was us, me, Graham Mills, and Dave White, actually looking at different safety data regarding capsaicin and figuring out a way to actually modify capsaicin itself. And again, there's additional papers that we've read on actually biological reactions that occur naturally in the lung regarding similar compounds that we've formed.
Wow, outstanding.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, this is a very interesting concept.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
I think you said, I think I saw you said that the patient uses the drug for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then just on an as-needed basis.
As needed, exactly.
Are there any long-term health risks associated with this drug?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. That's something that, according to the safety data we've read with capsaicin, which is our final product concept, by the way, is capsaicin essentially. It's just locked into some kind of protective molecule that we've created. There's no risk for capsaicin in the lung long-term use so far. But again, that'll be addressed in FDA clinical trials.
Thank you. My question really is about your team. I know that you're right now the only person working on it full time.
Exactly.
But do you have other folks on your team or on your team of advisors who've actually run or worked in medical startups?
Yeah, so my contact here, Jill Carey, she's actually done a bunch with medical startups. And also we've spoken in depth. We have great relationships with all these people on the slide, and they're all in pharma. They're all very interested in this proposition. We just have to get, again, funding for the initial stages and de-risk the value of the proposition itself. So, but yeah, we have plenty of contacts throughout the pharmaceutical industry and people that have done pharma. Yeah.
The product you mentioned is it
Chantix.
Do you have any data regarding that product in terms of sales? How big that?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Last year alone, it had $600 million in revenue, and that's despite the ad campaigns of it having suicidal ideation as a black box warning.
And how long did that product take to get into market through their various trials?
I believe it was the same pharmaceutical timeline. I don't know the exact number, so I'm not going to give you an exact number. But again, sorry, just to address that, Chantix is a psychotropic drug. It works on neuroreceptors. Our drug is a simple drug that works on the lung lining and TRP receptors in the lung.
You laid out a number of steps that pretty effectively can be accomplished to prove this concept with a small amount of money.
Yeah.
And then are anticipating going through the pharma lines to get FDA approval, much more capital intensive.
Yep.
Why wouldn't any of those participants step in for that amount of money to prove it and take it from the beginning and own the IP?
No, it's a good question. It's actually something we've discussed. Actually, because this is relatively new. We started this towards the end of last year. And again, we were all involved in school at the time, so it's kind of something we floated around, we've done more research into, and we've pitched at a few different smaller competitions, not really with our best effort, but this is the first time we're really pitching this and putting it together with a solid effort. I have discussed with them to just bringing capital together and actually just going ahead with it. That is a very good point. We could very well do that. Yeah.
Can you just speak a little bit more about the research that's already been done and how you have a sense that Capistan would effectively be able to, incentivize someone to stop smoking, and that it's enough of an incentive to stop smoking?
Yeah, that's a great question. Awesome question. So capsaicin itself is, again, it's the active ingredient in chili peppers, right? Which creates a burning sensation in the mouth. But in the lungs, extensive studies have been done in cough challenge trials. What they tried to do a few years back was they tried to solve the problem of coughing itself. In order to solve that problem, they had to create cough. So they created cough using capsaicin inside the lung. So that's where all the safety data comes in. And they, again, will capsaicin itself prevent people from smoking? From the data we've read, yes. It actually prevented them from inhaling further capsaicin. So they'd have an inhaler with capsaicin. As soon as they did it, they would cough, robust cough response. It would be uncomfortable, and they'd step away from the inhaler. And they wouldn't be able to cough, wouldn't be able to take it anymore. So essentially, the inhaler at this point would be a cigarette, because that would create capsaicin in the lung. Now, will it actually work? Again, that's for FDA approval to figure out, to see how effective it actually is. But we believe it could be very effective if we can create it as intended.
So once it's released,
Yeah.
does it repeat?
Exactly. So it does repeat. So there'll be enough dosing of our molecule locked inside that protective compound that once it becomes in contact with cigarette smoke, the next layer will essentially come up and it will be able to be released if they smoke again.
Do you think secondhand smoke would kick it off?
That's a great question. And that could be a gift or a curse. I'm not quite sure. But what I do know is that the psychology of smoking is complex. And secondhand smoke is one of the triggers for smoking in the first place. So if secondhand smoke does trigger it, then that could be a good thing. But we could always attenuate the molecule to actually only be triggered with an intense amount of smoke, as would be in a cigarette.
This might be a little bit cynical of me, but I'm sitting here kind of thinking about how pharmaceutical companies are going to make their money.
Yeah.
And it seems as if this is kind of a solution that works quickly, right? So it's going to work within those 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then you mentioned something about kind of the maintenance stage, right?
Exactly.
So has there been anything in the research that you've seen so far that shows how likely people are to actually need that maintenance stage? Because I assume that would play a big role in terms of how profitable this drug could actually be.
Yeah. Well, so whether they need it or not, it won't ever be actually determined. That's just the way that we're going to design the product, because that's the way a lot of pharmaceutical products are designed in terms of like maintenance therapies afterwards. And then like 10 years of clinical data later, they'll figure out whether that was actually needed or not. So the repeat sales will be there regardless for at least the first 10, 15 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a question on adoption and this idea of commitment in the morning.
Yeah.
You get up and you're committed, at night you're not committed.
Yeah.
That certainly works for me.
Yeah.
As far as the gym is concerned. But just the idea of putting a patch on or taking a pill
Yeah.
seems okay for me. But to inhale something
Yeah.
that, and because I can smoke later in the day if I want to, and it doesn't hurt me. In the morning I get enjoyment out of some nicotine.
Yeah.
But to take something that in the morning that I know if I want a cigarette later is going to kill me, or
Yeah.
I just wonder whether I'm really going to do that.
Yeah, that's a
And
good question.
Is the alcohol analogy helpful, or I mean, I'm just concerned about adoption, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's one of our primary concerns as well, adoption. You know, people could just say, no, why I want to smoke. Why the hell am I going to take this thing, right? But again, that's where the support system comes in handy. Significant others, like if your wife was on you about taking the drug every morning, you'd probably do it, probably be more likely to do it. or significant other or family member. You know, if they were there to support you and tell you to take it, then you'd most likely take it. And again, we'd make sure that they're fully committed to this. It's as strong as the user wants it to be. In the alcohol cessation market, disulfiram actually initially constituted 60% of the, I think it was a $75 million market. And it grew into about a $120 million market, in which case it was a 30% portion of that market. So it has sold. And it is a significant amount of the prescription of the alcohol cessation market.
Time is up.